This video is probably going to offend some people, but it's something that needs to be said, and specifically it needs to be said about my generation and people going through hard times. So we're going to get right into this because I really feel strongly about this subject, and it's just some stuff that's been on my heart that really pops out at me from the text as I'm reading it, and I'm excited to share it with you. So today we're going to talk about this victim mentality that we see arising in the culture today, and almost how it seems to be that being the victim is the virtue. So let's get started, because this is going to be tough. So here it is. I know a lot of young people that are my age, in both in church and just in life in general, that have this mentality about them, this way of thinking, where it seems to them like they can't achieve anything, or it's impossible for them to get ahead, or they blame everything around them, their circumstances, how their circumstances, how they were brought up, things of that nature, the system, anything that they can throw at to make an excuse that why they are not achieving. And I want to say this because there are obviously obstacles that you face when pursuing things of your dreams, or just in life in general, that prevent you a lot of times from achieving the goals that you have or the things you're trying to gain. And I'm not specifically talking about circumstances that prevent you from doing that. I don't want to get that confused with the two, because there are a lot of people facing very tough circumstances that just no matter how hard they try, they can't get ahead, or they can't get what they need, or get what they want. And it's the equivalent of people trying to preach the prosperity gospel to a third world country. It doesn't mix. You have to acknowledge the fact that there are situations in life where things are much more complicated than what you make them out to believe, right? Preaching a simple message that God wants everyone to be rich is oversimplifying the issues that we see in the world. So I don't want to oversimplify someone that is going through something, or circumstances that are outside of your control that you cannot prevent. I know very well what that's like. If you've watched the video where I talked about my past and my history, I totally get people that come from that situation. And really, it's about doing the best you can with what's been given to you. But, and this is a big but, that is not to say anything about the mentality, the victim mentality. My grandfather lived through World War II. He lost his hearing in World War II. And it's not from the ship that he was on. He was in the Navy, and the ship that he was on was hit by a torpedo. And as he was walking on the ship, it came out of nowhere, and they hit him. And then his head slammed up against the wall of the ship so hard that he lost his hearing. He lived through hard circumstances. And he never had this victim mentality. He never had this mentality where he blamed others. He was a joyful, happy man. This is my grandfather on my mother's side. Joyful, happy man, and he was one of the most nicest, kindest people you could ever be around. And he will forever go down in my memory in that way. So his circumstances prevented him from getting the things that he needed, but the mentality was strong and brought him through that. And I'm specifically talking about this victim mentality that we see, especially we see it growing so rapidly in my generation, for sure. It's happening. And the verses that I want to use to talk about this is in Matthew 25. It's the parable of the talents, and it's a really, really powerful parable, but I do think it's misunderstood in many ways, and it's used almost out of context in a lot of different situations. But basically, if you haven't heard the story, it's Matthew 25, and it's a parable that Jesus is telling, and it's about a wealthy man who gives to three servants of his, a varied set of talents, and not talents as in skills, even though it is kind of weird how that meshes, but talents as in this is currency, money that he gives to them to invest. And to one, it says to one he gives 5 talents, to another he gives 2 talents, and to another he gives 1 talent. But it says something interesting. It says, and this is in the ESV, each according to their own ability. And I feel like there's been a lot of teachers, specifically when they talk about finances, they talk about this story of finances and different things of that nature, and they look at it from that view of resources. But this isn't about resources. This is about ability. He gave the resources according to the ability of the servants. You understand that? So make no mistake, this is not about the resources, about the money, right? They each had a different starting point, but it was according to their ability that the master wanted to show them and reveal to them what they could do. He gave them according to what they could handle in their ability to do more and achieve more with what they were given. Well, if you've spent any time reading the story, you know how this story ends, or how it turns out. The one servant with the 5 talents doubles it into 10 talents. The other servant doubles it into 4 talents. But the final servant comes forward and he basically doesn't do that. He actually doesn't do anything with it. He buries it. He buries his talents. But it picks up in verse 24 because the master's talking with them. So this is what the servant who didn't do anything with his talent said. He said, well, it says in the verse, he also who had received the 1 talent came forward saying, Master, I knew, it's an interesting thing, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. And it's interesting because he said, I knew. His knowledge, his perception of his master, saying, you're a harsh man. You reap where you haven't sown. You do all these things unfairly because you get what you want no matter what happens. So I didn't risk anything knowing what you are. I just hid it in the ground. And it's interesting. I've heard one pastor say that his perception became his reality because the master responded and said to him, you wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. So we see how his perception became his reality. It's an interesting thing to look at. that the way he viewed the world manifested his destiny. He was wrong about his master. His master was not a wicked, evil person. His master saw right through it because he called him slothful. You wicked and slothful servant. Meaning, the problem isn't that I'm too harsh. The problem is you're lazy. You know, we see this mentality. I got to tell you, working in corporate and then working in churches and ministries, I see this mentality happen all the time. There are people that allow themselves to get into this place where everything that the company or the ministry does is viewed through this negative lens. Well, this is how they are. They don't listen to me. They're not fair. They don't care about me. And everything, it doesn't matter what the company or ministry does, everything is viewed through this negative interpretation. And eventually there comes a clash where there is a confrontation and the director or the manager or whoever has to have this confrontation with the person. And that manager becomes whatever they're saying they become. Do you see the deep symbolism here? This is why I geek out over the Bible. And the way they perceived it becomes their reality. But in all actuality, in the person's mind that's perceiving it this way, he's thinking, see, I was right. But really what's going on is you brought this on yourself. Don't let that become you. Don't let that manifest itself in that way. I know people that are in this process where they think like, oh, well, it's the company's always doing this against me, or the ministry's always doing this against me. The church won't hire me for this, or the church won't do this with me. And they think I'm not good enough for the church. And they put all the blame on the organization, on the church, on the business, whatever. They put it all on them. And it's great to do that because what happens is it takes all the attention off of you. Have you ever noticed how whenever something's going on in someone's life, we start seeing the most virtue signaling, or we start seeing the most complaining, and we start seeing the most blame happening when they're trying to, almost in a way, I think most of the time it's unconsciously, they're trying to take the attention off of them, because now when you can point the finger at someone and say, I'm not doing what I want to do because of this, now you no longer have to take any of the blame for the mess that you made. Now you can just dodge it and push it off on somebody else. I told you this is going to be rough. I think a lot of people are not going to like this. Now all of a sudden I don't have to put the attention on me and my faults and the fact that I'm not living up to the expectations that are given to me, and I know that I'm failing in a lot of areas, but I don't have to own up to that because now I can put it off on somebody else. Notice that master saw right through that. You wicked and slothful servant. And notice this too, that he took the talent that he gave that servant and he gave it to the person with 10 talents, not the person with 4 talents. But remember, in the beginning, he gave to each according to their own ability. To their own ability. This is not about money or finances or resources. This is about ability. And ability can be increased. Some people say, well, I'm just not that kind of a person. But the fact of the matter is that what you are able to do can always be changed. It can be changed by training. It can be changed by learning. It can be changed by self-education. It can be changed by desire, making up in your own mind that you're going to do this, determination. That's the word I'm looking for. Jeez, help me. Granted, there are situations where some people will say, like, you'll never be like a super athlete no matter how hard you run, but that doesn't mean you can't run better. That doesn't mean you can't better yourself. And it's interesting because this very last verse in this parable, or this very last thing that Jesus says, really drives this point home, and it takes all of the blame and puts it on our own shoulders. That the capacity that we handle is up to us. How far we go with God is up to us. How deep we go with God is up to us. How far we go with the desires and the dreams in our hearts is up to us. And he says in this last part, verse 29, for to everyone who has, will more be given. Has what? Has the ability. Not the money. The ability. Because he gave it to the guy with 10 talents. Even though the person with 4 talents doubled their money. The person who originally got 2 talents doubled it to 4. So they achieved something. But it wasn't about how much they had. It was about the ability they had to handle the load. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. All of a sudden, the blame is not on us anymore. It's not about, well, must be what God has for me. This must be it. This must be all that I can handle, or this must be just the kind of person I am. This is all I'll ever be. No, that the capacity is set on you now. It's ability, not resources. I can't stress that enough. And a lot of people can't see this in their own life, and you have to humble yourself. This is a humbling thing, to acknowledge the areas that you need to grow. And I live this every day, but when I noticed a real change in my life was when I realized that, you know what? I lost that position, not because it wasn't meant to be, not because those people were mean and unfair. I lost that position because of my own failure, because of my shortcomings, and I need to change. Confrontation is the key to growth. There is no growth without confrontation. And specifically, healthy confrontation. Sometimes that confrontation comes in the form of your boss at work coming at you and giving you a fresh bowl of truth. Eating crow, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's late, guys. I'm trying to get this done. Sometimes that confrontation comes in the form of a spouse telling you the things that you're doing wrong in the relationship. Sometimes that confrontation comes in the form of your pastor. Sometimes that confrontation comes in the form of your own thoughts. Like, I need to do this better. Healthy confrontation is the key to growth. That is the only way to growth. Growth doesn't happen without confrontation. So I hope, if anything you get from this, it's that you stop blaming the situation around you. You stop blaming the things around you. You stop blaming other people and how unfair it is. And you start looking at yourself and start asking the question, how can I grow? What can I do better? And then when you notice those things and you see the things that you need to grow in, You make an action plan. Well, this is how I'm going to grow. If I need to be more loving and kind, then I need to be willing to say, I'm going to point out a couple of people in my life who are difficult to deal with, and I'm going to go be loving and kind to them. If I need to be a better leader, I'm going to think of the 3 things I can do to be a better leader. I'm going to get healthy with confrontation. I'm going to be open about my thoughts and feelings. I'm going to do it in a nice way. I'm going to sit down and talk to these people and lead them and take responsibility for my failures so that way I can lead my teams better. Think how radically different the church would be if more people did this. If more people would stop blaming their circumstances and things around them and other people and start taking responsibility for their own actions. I'm not saying things that are genuinely out of control. I'm saying things that are within your mentality. Things where it's like, this person said these mean things to me. But are some of those mean things possibly true? Are there areas where I can get better? Are there areas where I can grow? That's how we overcome that victim mentality. Guys, I hope that this blessed you. I hope that it helped you. I hope that it encouraged you. Please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I will catch you next time. Peace.